Hey, Richest Money Maniacs, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about a historic moment in the history of the United States of America. A government agency without any elected representation, has nothing to do with Congress, actually is an agency that acts completely on its own authority, which is just invented out of thin air, has decided to lay claim to property and contracts all across the nation. What does that mean for you? Let's get right to it. Hey, Richest Money Maniacs, welcome back. Tom coming at you. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're always putting up new content, and we're always trying to make sure that everyone who watches these gets value out of it concerning mastering your finances. That's what all of this is, all these videos and all this information is all about. It's just simply helping people realize the power they have inside themselves to master their own finances. So why am I going to talk about this new what's a good way to describe it? Totalitarian fascist dictatorship order from the CDC, laying claim to have authority over private contracts in the United States, or anywhere for that matter, without an act of Congress, without an act of the judicial branch, without an act of the executive branch. They just kind of made it up. It says, well, in our charter, we have broad authority concerning pandemics and communicable diseases and viruses, and reasonable effort is the phrase that's used in their charter. Reasonable effort. Reasonable effort, apparently in the CDC's mind, means that they have complete dictatorial authority to do whatever it takes, including telling people to stay home and not go to work, violating every law in the land, state constitutions, local and county and city ordinances, and of course, the big one that nobody seems to care about anymore, which is the U.S. Constitution. They also have the ability to, insist that you get a shot of something which you have no idea what it is, and you're going to have to just take it because we say so. Even though it was rushed, it was not tested, that doctors have said that these are dangerous. Oh, and by the way, there's a cure already that they have conveniently made illegal so that profits could be turned by Big Pharma. Now, again, what does this have to do with you and mastering your finances? Well, here's what it has to do with you. Mastering your finances means that you have to understand how money works and how currency and the financial institutions work. And the way they work, one of the ways they work, is that when you come to an agreement with somebody else and you want to exchange value, you have to have a foundation to work in that's the same. So if I want to have an exchange with you, like this video, the managing of expectations and a moral foundation for us to stand on to be able to do business together is vital. That means we both have to believe the same thing. We both have to believe that your word is worth what I'm taking a risk. I'm taking your word that you're going to do for me what you promised to do, and you're taking my word that I'm going to do what I promised to do for you. So let's say you're a renter and I'm a landlord, and so I'm taking your word that you're going to pay rent each month, that you promise that you're going to pay rent, because if you don't, I could lose that property, because then I won't be able to make the mortgage payments. I won't be able to pay for the electricity. I won't be able to pay for the garbage. I won't be able to pay for the water, right? So we make an agreement. And so we sign a piece of paper. The paper is not really the agreement, though. The most important part of that value exchange is that two people promise to be honest, upstanding, law-abiding citizens, and that they are on the same moral plane, right? That the one is not trying to cheat or run a scam on the other and move in or even the landlord, that I'm going to let you move in, but it's a dump. I'm not going to take care of it. In fact, I'm not even going to pay my mortgage. I'm not going to pay the utilities, and you're going to be paying me rent all the time until they come and suddenly foreclose on the property and kick you out, even though you paid your rent. See, remember, it goes both ways, especially in that particular situation. When you talk about a basic fundamental value exchange, renter and landlord is a great example. You are taking the landlord's word that the property will be maintained, safe for your family to live in, and you'll be comfortable living in it. And the landlord is taking the renter's word that you will pay the rent so that I can keep it nice, and maybe profit a little bit also, so that I can go feed my family, right? So I'm providing as a landlord the service of a place for your family to live. The renter is providing the service to the landlord by paying the rent to be able to keep the property maintained and to be able to keep the lights and the water on, and also to be able to feed his own family by running his business, which is to own rental properties. So the value exchange goes both ways. And if that fundamental agreement doesn't have a common ground, it doesn't have a common ground of trust, that you can't trust the other party, then there's no way to make an agreement. You can't make the agreement in good conscience. The renter won't rent the property simply because they don't know if the landlord is going to keep the lights on or is going to continue to pay the mortgage, right? And that's happened. It happened in 2008. People were paying their rent for the house they were renting, but the landlord was already bankrupt and just collecting the rent and pocketing it and going out of the country, taking it out of the country, until finally the banks foreclosed on the property and kicked the people out of the home that they were renting, even though they paid the rent. That's the real kicker. Now, what we've got here is an article by Mrs.org. And this is a really good article because it's nice, because it doesn't really talk about one political slant or the other. It just presents the idea that the actions of the CDC will have certain effects, which we don't even know or can't anticipate. And it's not really within their authority to do that, because this is not a reasonable effort. This is an extraordinarily broad, sweeping effort, and it's very ill-conceived. In fact, the curious thing for me about this whole situation with the CDC basically putting a moratorium on evictions, right? They're laying claim that they have the authority to tell people if they can evict a renter from their property because of the COVID pandemic, right? And everybody being locked down. That's what it's about. They're trying to make it so that people aren't homeless and then gathering in large places and spreading, right? That's the what if scenario. Except that, of course, nobody's really taking into consideration that the numbers have been declining very steadily, and it's already on the CDC's website that most of the folks who did unfortunately perish from this current health challenge actually had 2.6 other challenges already that really caused the death, but they also happened to test positive for whatever. So without going too far afield into that, the notion here is that the CDC has gone way past their charter. They are taking on way more authority than they have and that they should, because the CDC has no real working knowledge of the financial markets, of the real estate markets, of law, of anything except disease. That's all they know. And so they are not experts in contract law. They are not experts in the far-reaching effects that this kind of a decision will have on an economy. Now, here's the other curious part of this decision by this government agency to just claim authority over all of us, right? And remember something, we're the government. The law comes from us. Thanks to the Constitution, we're the only country on the planet where the citizens are the sovereign and the law comes from us. Now, here's the curious thing. It was government decisions that caused all of this economic hardship for people to not be able to pay the rent. Remember when they said only essential workers can go to work and earn a living? Well, who's essential? Who's not essential? Well, obviously government workers are essential. Boy, they're right there at the top because you got to keep the government functioning and they need their paychecks and their pensions. Oh, and well, you need people to get food, they got to eat, right? So, all right, well, they're essential too. And, well, you want to keep the lights on, so the electric workers, they're essential too. And what else? They did not think about this at all because it's my own personal opinion that every single job is essential to the person who is getting the paycheck and feeds themselves and their family off of it. Now, the far-reaching fallout has not even begun to be felt by these poor decisions that government officials and elected officials have made along the way. And some not even elected, some are just appointed, and they have no way of any kind of check and balance to make sure that they don't get out of control. But that's a whole different video, so we won't go into that. The whole point here is the government created this challenge, and now the CDC is making it worse. They're a government agency that's absolutely making it worse by destroying with one order the very fabric of business and value exchange, which is trust in a contract. If you can't trust the local authorities to uphold contract law, you cannot do value exchange. You cannot do business, which means the recovery will almost certainly never happen. We will forever limp along and look to the elected officials and the Federal Reserve to print more magic money and then send it to us for not producing any wealth at all. Now see, remember something. That's where wealth comes from, is from the value exchange that people have with each other. So that value exchange is what creates wealth. The government does not create wealth. It only takes from its citizens via taxes and other tricks and then redistributes it. So keep that in mind. So let's read a little bit of this article and see what Mrs.org says about the CDC's decision to overreach its charter. The CDC is America's new landlord. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, operating under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, has asserted jurisdiction over private residential leases nationwide. So not just that. This is, only dictators do that. Only dictators say this law applies to everybody regardless. Only kings and queens do that. Not a republic. This is the Republic of the United States of America. Okay, back to the article. It intends to curtail evictions until at least the end of the year, and in fact, its new directive threatens federal criminal penalties against landlords who ignore tenant declarations made using CDC forms. It is unclear, to put it mildly, exactly how this jurisdiction or private contracts and state local courts flows even to Congress, much less an administrative agency acting on its own. One federal official justifies the bizarre and legally dubious action based on the CDC's broad charter to stop the spread of communicable diseases, a charter which they've failed miserably with COVID. Okay, so that particular statement, I completely agree. In fact, it's just funny to search online all the doctors who cannot stop ripping the CDC apart for their incredibly piss-poor job at controlling it or even actually reporting facts. All right, so back to the article. I'm not going to read this quote. I want to go down towards the end there. It says here later in the article, even during the most turbulent periods in American history, including the Great Depression, World War II, and an 1880s tuberculosis outbreak which killed 1 in 7 people, virtually no one expected the federal government to suspend rent. This action by the CDC in response to a very manageable and retreating cold virus is the kind of quietly unprecedented development we've come to expect this year. This is a watershed movement for the United States, U.S. When you destroy trust in contract enforcement, you create terrible ripple effects throughout society. Something this radical should not be rushed into place with such little forethought, especially when it amounts to buying votes in a national election. But of course, in a managerial state, we should expect just this type of short-sighted political consideration to prevail over good sense and justice. So let's comment on that particular paragraph. There we have faced as a nation far worse, just with tuberculosis, not to mention all the people this year and last year who died of the flu and pneumonia, which is way more than the cerveza sickness. I don't know what else to call it, or else this video will be shut down. We've faced way more and never, ever had a government agency do something like this, and worse, get away with it. These people, if they are allowed to continue, will absolutely run completely amok. Now here's another important point. Let me go back to this paragraph. Something this radical should not be rushed into place with such little forethought. That's a really important statement. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned the idea that the CDC are not experts in finance, contract law. They're not even experts in anything except disease, medicine, and they have proven time and time again that even that expertise, quote unquote, is pretty questionable at best. They've got working doctors who are telling them you're doing it wrong. Hydrochloroquine cures this challenge. It's just a strain of the cold. Everybody's going to have it. So yeah, if you test, everybody's had a cold. Okay, now I'm getting off on a different topic. The idea here is one of the most important sentences in this paragraph is about this decision destroying the fabric of contract law. And the far-reaching effect of that is that the nation can't function. That's really what it comes down to. Now, I won't go into the details of that in this video. I want to read the last paragraph for you, and then we'll comment on that too. The CDC wants to effectively vitiate contracts. When you tell one party that it need not perform and the other that it cannot sue for non-performance, you radically alter the bargaining power of those parties. The contract they signed becomes nothing more than an aspirational document, a legislative or administrative tool to be written at the will of politicians. The effects of this moratorium undoubtedly will spill over in unforeseen ways as Americans get used to the idea that their financial obligations can be erased by state edict. The tremendous cost will be borne by all of us because when contracts are not enforceable, every transaction must account for much higher risk. What this effectively will do, folks, is make it near impossible for the poor to ever become even middle class. For the poor or the middle class to ever really become super wealthy, because it will become so expensive to do any kind of business that only the super wealthy and the extremely big corporations will be able to enforce any kind of contract at all. Why? How? How will that be? Because only the super rich and only large corporations can lobby the government officials to enforce a contract. See, you watching this video won't be able to afford to do that. So starting a new business in the United States, no one's going to want to finance you. There will never be a bank that will finance a small owner again. That's what that means, because, well, the contract isn't enforceable and the bank can't sue you for non-performance. Think about that. Just think about that for a minute. If we allow this, you will never be able to master your finances. You will never be able to start something and grow it because it will be crushed by this very kind of dictate, by government agencies that have no clue about what they're doing. So, what does this have to do with you mastering your finances? There it is right there. You either start speaking up and voting out people who support or not supporting these type of things, or speaking out against this type of thing and insisting that they follow the law, which is the Constitution, and enforcing contracts, then or we basically lead ourselves right into a state-run everything. Now, I'm not going to go too far afield in this, but I am going to mention this here at the end of this video. It's important to remember that the Federal Reserve has been buying private equities, which means now the CDC is the landlord of the United States, and the Federal Reserve owns all the corporations of the United States. Oh, and federally backed mortgages, which is almost all of them in the United States. So that means that they're landlords, and they own the real estate and the companies that keep the company running, the country running. This is becoming a socialist communist state. It is not the United States of America, the republic for which it stands. So think about that when you're thinking about mastering your own finances. Now, how do you protect yourself against that? The best way to protect yourself against those types of things is to watch my other videos on silver, gold, laser funds, and to build or buy other businesses. In fact, make sure you check out Dan Pena, check out Robert Kiyosaki, check out George Gammon, check out Doug Andrew, check out Tom Wheelwright, and I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. If I am, check out the list on this video at the end, and there will be a list of names for you to use as references, because that's how I'm protecting myself. So I hope you found this video helpful, especially in the face of such an epic, a historic, unfortunately, negative historic moment in the history of this country. If you did, please like the video, and especially if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And even better, if you have questions or you just completely disagree with me, then comment down below, because you know what? We're not meant to agree on everything. However, when we want to exchange value, we have to at least have a foundation to stand on. So we have to agree on that. All right, everybody. See you next time.